This past week, I had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of mayoral candidates and interview them as part of the Vote in Leander series. My interview with Fred Summers is next here on Lean in Leander. So we're back here at Lantern Media Studios. I'm your host of Lean in Leander, Andrew Naudine, and we are continuing with the Vote in Leander series. And today I'm here with Fred Summers. Fred, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.
Good to be here.
So Fred is one of the candidates who has offered himself up as a mayoral candidate. So what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time here talking to Fred, get to know him a little bit better, and hopefully help you as a voter kind of find out a little bit more about him and help you make some decisions on your voting. So Fred and I had met once before, just to kind of let you know. We met one time. I think we had coffee at Starbucks, right?
We did.
Yeah,
We did.
so just to kind of get to know each other a little bit before we did this, which was very nice. And so we're going to kind of start with that. You've been a Leander resident for how many years now?
30 years.
30 years. So you've been here a while.
A while. Yes. I've seen a lot of things change.
Right. That's what we talked about when we had coffee. So tell people what brought you to Leander. Obviously, 30 years ago, something happened, got you here. What was that?
Well, growing up as a boy, we enjoyed country living and being in Austin when I met my wife and starting to have children. I think we had 4 at the time when we moved from Austin to Leander to get back in the country.
Right. Okay.
So it makes it nice to raise children and, kind of out off the busy streets.
Right.
Austin was super growing.
Right.
And Leander was far enough out that we felt like we...
At the time, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So that's nice. So you came out here, I guess, right after you married your wife and started your family, right? Would that be a fair assessment?
We were actually about 15 years into our...
Oh, okay.
I've been married 43 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's a good long time.
Yes, thank
That's
you.
a good long time. I'm going to make one little adjustment.
Yes.
So let's just move it there a little bit so we get you better.
Okay.
So yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. I'm closing in on 30. So
Hey,
it's not easy.
any mile marker of that stature
Right?
is quite an accomplishment.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And the wives get the gold star.
Well, yeah, and I mean, they put up with us for that long, right?
That's right.
Okay, so now your family, I've seen pictures of your family. I think you have 3 children, right?
We have 6.
6. Okay, so I saw a picture with 3 of them, right?
One of those was my granddaughter. So
okay.
We have 2 girls, 2 boys, and then 2 more girls.
And they're all flown the coop now, or?
We have our youngest daughter, who's 25, still lives with us.
Oh, okay, all right. So, and then you, as a resident of Leander, you started a business here as well, right?
I did.
Tell us a little about your business.
We started a family business in the generator world back in '78, and it grew. We started to see that not only were the small generators that were nice, like a motorhome generator,
Mm-hmm.
that was a good start, and they were like a welder. So if it made electricity, we started working Austin welder and generator service.
Oh, okay.
And then we noticed that there was the generators on concrete, and the state they wouldn't move. So we went out to the standby business, got very big in that industry, and moved away from the motorhomes. And so in 2000, I decided I would like to move back towards the smaller generators,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I started another business.
Okay, so have you maintained the same kind of business, like, I don't know, your logo and or have you kind of changed the business with the changes that you've made on your focus?
We did change.
Okay,
It was,
okay.
It wasn't a branch. It was
Right.
a brand new business.
Okay, so what is that? What are you called today?
Well, it's transitioned as well.
Okay.
It was Gentech to start in 2000.
Okay.
And during the COVID episode, everything changed again.
Mhm.
So I brought everything close to home and used my nickname. A lot of my customers had given me a nickname of Generator Fred.
Okay.
So I changed that. That's my new DBA.
Okay. All right. Interesting stuff. And So from the business perspective, you've been a business owner in Leander has it been the full 30 years
Yes.
or? Okay, so the whole time you've been a business
I'm
owner
sorry,
here.
it's 24.
24 years,
Lived here 30. The new
24
business.
years
Yep.
business. Okay, all right, all right. Good
Yep.
clarification.
Yes.
So you've probably seen a lot, and you've probably had plenty of opportunities to engage with, permitting and things of that nature. Is that one of the things that now? What are some of the drivers that made you wake up one day and said, you know what, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring. I'm gonna run for mayor here in Leander. What help us understand what some of that motivation is?
Great segue. They annexed our neighborhood 7 or 8 years ago, and they grandfathered my business at the time into that picture.
Okay.
And some years later, uh, we have chickens on our property. So that was really a driving force that the city had adopted rules and regulations that now apply to my
Your land.
the country living land.
Right, right.
And I would say why, And in my view, from my viewpoint, one size does not fit all.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of people that fall into those kind of categories. I thought, if we could manage those issues in a more gentle way, not so just a rule's a rule. That's kind of really what pushed me towards this.
Okay.
I didn't do well trying to get it resolved through the court system. So I thought, well, let's try an inside route. And I'd say,
Okay.
we're going to do it. Let's do it all the way.
Okay. No, hey, that's a reasonable motivation in my opinion. So you were, I think the term is ETJ, right? It was ETJ, and then you were annexed, right?
Yes.
And when did that exactly happen? Like it's
I wanna
7 years
say
ago-ish?
I'm not real good with
Okay.
timing, but about that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And since then, now, you're in the city of Leander as far as that's concerned. Has there been any particular items outside of your chickens that you've noticed? Like someone this is an interesting angle from my perspective because I've really never talked to anybody who was in the ETJ who's now in the city limits, right? So there are problems and maybe, some good things and bad things with that. What has your experience been there? Like, that's interesting to me.
My observation was the water and wastewater upgrade that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern was why? It's a rural neighborhood. So I have a lot of questions going into this endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I get in a lot of trouble because I have more questions than I have solutions.
Right.
But I don't understand the mechanism of revenue for services that is required and it comes with. So I look at my property as more of a hostile takeover,
Right.
because I now have it's tied to the water and wastewater.
Okay.
So they could build. I'm on about an acre lot, so they could probably build a couple of houses on my lot and easily now hook it to the water and wastewater.
Right. Right.
I'm hearing that's going to be a huge price for me as a homeowner to tie into that thing.
Okay.
I've already taken care of making sure my septic system is good
Right.
and repaired it along the way. As
Right.
you might so now just there's things like that I'm convinced that one size doesn't fit all in our community, and I'm really going after the residents, the side of everything. I want to live in an understanding way with more residents, get more residents involved in what we're doing in City Hall.
No, I think it's a very valid point, and again, a unique perspective on some of the growth that we have here in Leander. Because again, and we've talked about this pretty much with every candidate, whether they were an incumbent or not. The growth has been exponential, right? It's been really fast, and it's been a lot. And so sometimes these types of, I don't know if you would necessarily refer to them as tertiary issues, but they're kind of like, well, we're so concentrating on the growth and all that stuff that maybe we inadvertently or not, I don't know, but maybe we neglect a few things that maybe there's an opportunity there to have some more conversation, or maybe even find a more friendly methodology, and using your term, right? Just to make it a little bit easier for those folks who find themselves, and by no fault of your own, right? I mean, you lived here, right? And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, you find, and it can't. You're not alone. You're not the only person who this occurred to, right? This is obviously going to occur, and probably will continue to occur until such time the city's growth is fully realized, right? There's always going to be some annexation of ETJ, and I know that I'm only kind of familiar with that issue, right? I don't have a whole lot of experience dealing with that, but I've some of the committees that I've served on and some of the projects, I'll call them, that I've been involved with or at least had some conversation about, have touched on that from time to time, right? So again, going from a very rural, area here in Central Texas, and I'm not saying we're necessarily becoming an urbanized area. There's some urban development, but overall, I wouldn't necessarily refer to us as an urban area at this point. It's, again, probably more suburban than anything else. But it's interesting. So beyond that, like you have a couple of things that you're like, I'm really curious about this. I'd like to find out more. And then it motivates you enough to where you're like, all right, I'm going to run for mayor. Was there any one particular, tell me the one thing, like the one story that because this happened or because this occurred, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related specifically to the ETJ issue, right? It could be just be something else. Like at that point, you're like, you know what? I'm going to do this.
Great conversation. I am a do things by the seat of my pants person. I am prone to jump in and then wonder, what did I do? In many cases in my life.
All right.
That could be good. That might be bad.
Hey, it just depends on your perspective.
It definitely cuts out some of the fear factor and what's
Right.
going on. Hey, this go around, it's been a combination of. I'm going to lay the foundation of the but God. Everything in my life is tempered by but God. My situation is going along, but God. This happened to me, but God. This happened to my friend, but God. So I weigh the but God factor in this as well. By seeing there's pressure points in our midst right now, financial, political. I'm what another driving factor is. Remember, they would say, "Well, we don't talk about politics and religion at Sunday dinner."
Right.
I'm convinced that was the wrong statement along the way. So I think there's a movement right now called the Great Awakening, and it's creating a conversation. It's creating opening this type of media is overtaking mainstream media. So we're moving into a whole new where God allowed us to step into something that makes more sense, to have a conversation, to work on things. One thing that I bring to the table, no matter what I'm doing, is I'm a great troubleshooter.
Okay.
By fixing generators.
Yeah, I could see that.
I've learned skills
Sure.
to ask questions, and they can be asked over the phone. You get the right people talking about a problem. You can, and again, we're in a new era. I've gone from landline to cell phone
Right.
in my career,
Right.
and so now we have Zoom. That's new to me as well. But we can cover a lot more ground. But we got to ask the right questions and be talking to the right people. And if we got I call it monkey business going on anywhere. And that's really what I want to find out. Okay, what is pushing things against our residents that doesn't need to be pushed?
Right.
I call that monkey business.
Right. And I think I know what you mean by that. I mean, I think it's fair to say you're very inquisitive from that perspective, right? You at least look at something, you're like, well, why is that happening, right? And so there's a lot of people who would just say, well, why is that happening, and then move on, right?
Yes.
So part of your endeavor here, part of your involvement, or at least making yourself a public figure, because that's basically what you've done at this point, is inquisitive. It's trying to find out, right? And I don't see I don't see where there's a whole lot of there's opportunity there. Again, if you're asking the right questions and you're talking to the right people, right? So you have to try to avoid really, I know the term in the social media world, or even in just on the news, it's always misinformation, like stuff that, well, that's not really the truth, right? It's presented in a way that it's perceived by some people as factual, but at the end of the day, it's not, right? It's not part of the conversation, or it's someone's opinion of that, right? I just recently had a conversation with a friend of mine where we were talking about this very subject, right?
Mhm.
And we were talking about it's not the harm. The harm isn't really done when the person says whatever it is that they say, right? It can be anybody. It can be a social media figure. It can be a politician. It can be a movie star. It can be The Rock on the WWE, right? I mean, it can be anybody who says anything. The problem is how that is restated, right? Like it's how people consume that information and then restate it. And when they restate it, they state it in a way that it seems factual, but again, it's no longer the facts, right? It's a different opinion, and unfortunately, the algorithms and all the stuff that we deal with in the world today, they emphasize anything that's negative, right? So if you turn a comment on its head, with the original comment being, it can be completely innocent. It can be a very, very, I'm just asking why, right? I just want to know why. And someone turns that into a negative connotation, then it takes off. And then all of a sudden, Andrew asked a really stupid question, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And that's always the fear that you kind of run into when you put yourself into, these types of environments, that people can misconstrue what it is that you're trying to do and how you're trying to say it, right?
Sure.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really do respect and admire anybody who takes this path, right?
Mhm.
Because this is tough. This is not easy. Not only the process of actually making yourself available and making yourself a public figure from that perspective, even though it's a microcosm, even if it's just Leander, right? 39 square miles, right? It's not that much, but there's a lot of people here, right? It's 100,000 people in this town.
Sure.
And at least 1% of that 100,000 is paying attention, right? Because we know that's what votes, right?
Right.
So that's a lot of people. So kudos on that. I mean, I feel that way for every candidate. I really do. I just like this is a lot to take on. So outside of your troubleshooting and you're being able to kind of like find solutions, ask the right questions, what other qualifications would you say you're bringing to the table? Again, outside of the mayor, that's really kind of a leadership position within the at-large council members, right? I always say this, that everybody's basically running for mayor. There's only a few people who actually want the title, right? Because
Sure.
when you're at large, you're representing the entire city, right? So how would you answer that question when posed?
Um, I'm the oldest of four boys, and so the oldest child, birth order kind of deal, automatically pushes the firstborn child into those kind of you
The
learn
additional
quick.
responsibility,
Yeah.
firstborn as well, so I get it.
Yeah. And also firstborn of 7 grandchildren, all boys. So you're kind of thrust into it, and you get more attention
Right,
along the way.
right.
So
Both good and bad.
Yes, absolutely. And there'll be another podcast we'll have as
Right.
entertainment
Right.
value from the mayor's seat. But natural leader comes with figuring out how to run a business, run a family, interact with people. When you're my business part of it has been the most valuable. I can remember when I'm working on a generator as a rookie, man, and the customer, we never asked our customers to go away. Our customers are actually part of our family. They're our friends. We like to treat it that way. And so they'll be standing there watching me fix the generator, and I'm sweating bullets as a rookie. So growing through those kind of interaction, people skills is, I can see the value of that in me. My wife always says, I'll be trying to lead her. She's you're a leader all the time. I've got this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a friendly, again, I can't do anything without the vote, without masses of people who take. And I'm counting on. I'm kind of like a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
Name recognition only. Back to the but God factor.
Mm-hmm.
This ain't gonna happen except for God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not spending money on a campaign. In fact, what you're doing here is what I'm hoping for.
Okay.
That this kind of face value of Fred Summers, this is how it gets out.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you this though, whether I get into the council chambers as the mayor, I will be spending more time there as a resident,
Okay.
one way or the other, because again, this time and space where we're at, we have to have that.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. I mean, I talk about this often for those of you who follow the podcast. There's a few, not millions, but there's a few.
Let's build. Come on.
Anyway,
grind it out.
excuse me. Yeah, so when I came to Leander, one of the things that I did with purpose, right? It was something that was a decision that I made. I got here and I said, you know what? I've lived in Houston for 20 some odd years, right? And I moved around a little bit, but even in that, I had a few friends, I had a few neighbors that I knew. I really just didn't know my community, right? I didn't. I did a number of volunteer, oriented positions there. I served on a couple of different committees and things of that nature, but I never really knew my community. Mm-hmm. So when we moved out here, I was very purposeful in that regard, in that I was like, I'm going to know my neighbors. I'm going to know the people who live on my street. I'm going to make sure that I'm making that effort. Yeah. If they reciprocate, fine. If they don't, fine. That's not the issue. The issue is that I want to know who they are, right? I just present myself as someone they could come to if they need help, or a cup of sugar, whatever, right? And then because Leander has a little bit of a small town ethos, right? What I found right away was like, okay, this is really an interesting environment and it offered an opportunity to get involved, right? You have an opportunity to get involved. It's not so big that you get lost in the mix, right?
Good point.
But it's big enough to where if you are at least motivated to try to make some change or, substantiate some new ideas, there's an opportunity there, right? So I made myself available right away, and I, started volunteering for committees with the city and started to get to know some of the people. One of the reasons I'm able to do this is because of that, right? Had I not made that effort, nobody know who I am, right? At least, there's some recognition of, okay, well, this guy, and, he's fair, he's balanced, he'll speak with everybody and have a nice conversation. And that's the point. That's always the point of this, is just to sit down. And this is the conversation that I think everybody should have with the candidates, right? But they can't. It's just, that's not possible. It's not scalable to sit down with everybody one-on-one, right? So what I try to do is sit down with you one-on-one and have a conversation and just kind of reveal some things, hopefully, about who you are and what you're thinking, that helps people get a little bit of an insight, And I, when we talked about this, it was like, I'm not here to do, gotcha journalism or anything like that. I'm not looking to do that at all, right? I just want to, hopefully present an opportunity and a platform for people to get to know, the how do I say it on the podcast? On my website, it says the people, the places, and the things that are Leander, right? And you're one of the people that are Leander, right? So again, I appreciate you taking the time. In your business world, because I think this is a good way to kind of talk about some of these things, outside of your own personal business, have you ever had an opportunity or an experience where you've maybe served with an association? Like, I don't know, is there a Generator Association of Greater Texas? I have no idea.
There is, where I have served is in the racing industry.
Okay.
We had a track in Kyle, it was called Central Texas Speedway.
Okay.
and I provided the pace car for 7 years.
Oh.
I bought a 2009 Challenger. Back at the time, the SRT model in 2009 was the big boy.
Okay, yeah. I
And
think I know which car you're talking about.
It was orange. And
Of course.
we outfitted it with lights
Uh-huh.
and on both ends, and gave rides. But that was something I wanted to do with that car. It
Right.
gave me more of an opportunity to have more fun with the car. We did that for 7 years, put 170,000 miles on that thing, going back and forth to Kyle. We did some guest shows in Houston at one of the tracks there. Tried to get in with Texas Motor Speedway, but they only let Chevrolets run that track. So this was a Mopar. But through that endeavor, it was all Christ-centered, an outreach,
Right.
a preaching moment. It was the Pace for Life pace car.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
the last call safety car when we did road courses.
Okay.
But
All
we
right.
developed a gospel track to hand out. But we focused a lot on giving kids rides. And, it's just, if you like racing and you're around the cars and you end up on the track, it's very fun for the people who are hanging around the track.
Yeah, no, I've that's funny because I had a very similar conversation the other day. A friend of mine is now getting interested in F1,
Yeah.
right? And when I was in the hospitality industry, I worked with Sheraton, and we had a driver, and there was a Grand Prix. I think there was 2 years that they did it in Houston.
Yeah.
So we were able to get into the paddock. It was at the George R. Brown Convention Center. It was the first time in a Grand Prix history that they had a air-conditioned paddock, right? Because it's normally outside, right? So all the cars were inside. That was really cool. That was a lot of fun. And I agree. I mean, I'm a car-ish guy, I know how to, get in there and, do a few things, but, I've always bought the car that I want. I've never built the car that I wanted. So that's interesting. And it also kind of, you talked a little bit about the service aspect of some of that as well. And it sounds like that's something that you do. Do you continue to serve in that kind of capacity? I mean, not to necessarily bring religion into the conversation, but just from a service perspective, it sounds like that's where you've provided a lot of community service. Does that continue today?
It does.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. What are you doing now?
I'm involved with an organization called Celebrate Recovery for folks who have either hurts, hang-ups, or habits that hinders them.
Okay.
And we teach them how to overcome that, but with biblical principles.
Okay.
And it's a nationwide, worldwide ministry. I do it with Great Hills Baptist Church.
Okay.
They're friends of mine, and
Okay.
we have a meeting there every Wednesday. So I've been with them for 2 years now, and we do that every Wednesday.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. And again, you're making yourself available, and again in a service-oriented kind of way, right? I like to highlight the fact that there is a servant leadership component to anybody who puts themselves forth in any kind of civic regard, right?
That's a great phrase, servant leader.
Or there should be. I mean, that's kind of what you should be doing there. That should be part of what your thought process is, not self-aggrandation, but more, hey, I'm here to make sure, the little guy gets taken care of, or however you might want to frame that, right?
And that's something that I want to work harder on as well. I know this is a volunteer deal. I'm 67, so I'm kind of retired. I can pretty much do what I would like to do, need to do, in this case, want to serve my community. But I'd like to be an open door mayor. They don't even have an office for the mayor because of how they do things now.
Right. And it's because it is a volunteer position. They're not actually city staff, right?
Exactly.
So there's no office per se.
So I'm hoping that I can find somewhere where I can be open door at least 3 days a week. But people who have something going on that they'd like to talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's, in the council chambers, it's kind of the way they run that meeting is kind of like going to court. And it can be intimidating.
It is intimidating at times. I will agree with that. It can be.
And it's on a time
Right.
clock.
Right.
So that's the feel I want to have with the residents. I mean, in the flow chart, in the city book, it says residents.
Right.
And then it's got the mayor.
Right.
And then the council.
Right.
So I really want to help the residents understand how much they hold water for themselves if they will hold it.
Right,
If they'll
right.
get involved. And so, yeah, I'm one of these guys that I like to have a big splash.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, whether it's from the mayor's seat or on the others in the chamber, I'd like to see 200-300 people show up at every meeting now. That's and with the community outreach.
I mean, anything is possible, right?
Mhm.
So I wouldn't, I don't mean to laugh, and I'm not laughing at the prospect of that. I think that's a wonderful idea. It's a great idea. Having been to several council meetings, the reason that I chuckle is they go until 11 o'clock sometimes.
Yeah.
I know there was one I remember that it actually went to like 1 a.m. or something like that. So
I think
that's
that my idea about this large number more is to be a peaceful participation. So we don't all have to speak, but if the council sees that we got that kind of
I agree.
involvement, then
I
we
agree.
can, and then as the mayor, I get to bring proposals to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
I admit late to the table here, but I'm here, and I'm a fast learner. I found out I'm a better student than I give myself credit for.
I wish I could say the same.
I got my high school degree, but I was looking out the window at sixth grade,
Right.
and there was things that were I had to go to summer school to graduate. There was a program where you work in the afternoon, so you got 15 hours of credit, so that helped. So there were some things along the way that helped me graduate.
Mm-hmm.
But as the oldest child, as creative, we've been created by God. I think in some ways, our creativity is not explored. Our aptitudes are not brought to the cream to the.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
So I think again that can be another conversation from the mayor chair with the community. Hey, what else can we do? One of the things that I would love to see, and it seems impossible, is to end the property tax.
Mm.
If we were able to do that, that will be a catalyst that will bring people to, well, how did that happen? What's going on?
Right.
It would free up monies that they may want to spend in the community
Right.
to help with. So it seems like a snowball that would help in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, endowment money.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say right now, I'm in full favor of a Cheddar's restaurant in Leander. Well, let's bypass Cedar Park on that one and put that one. So I'll fight for that one for sure.
I would join you at the door because I do like Cheddar's myself.
And
too.
another thing, if
in case they're listening, that's a good sponsorship right there.
yes, it is. I love to be an ambassador,
Mm-hmm.
especially for places I love. So another one I want to volley for is for Cane's to add fried shrimp. They're just chicken. Can you imagine what it would be like for fried shrimp with that? That would be a nice addition that shouldn't cause too much chaos in the kitchen.
Right. That's a thought. That's definitely a thought. Yeah. Cane's shrimp. That's interesting. I guess that maybe if the dog ate the shrimp, I don't know. I don't know.
Just an expansion. Just an expansion.
No, but again, it does highlight at least some creative thinking, right? And that's always part of one of the things that you would hope for, at least in a candidate, is that they're going to be creatively, contemplating some of the issues and some of the complications that occur. With some creativity and a creative mind and a creative approach, right? Because I think far too often we end up very siloed and very like, we can only do it this way or we can only do it that way. And honestly, I would say some of the problems that we have today stem from that type of thinking. Like there's only one way to do this. This is how we've always done it, right?
Exactly.
And so, it's always a good thing, I think, to add new voices and add new ideas to the mix, right? It's a gumbo at the end of the day, right? It's a lot more. I remember when I was a kid, and I'm a first generation American, and my family was from Mexico, and there was opportunity there to talk about that a little bit when I was growing up, and one of the things that I remember very, very distinctly was the idea of the great melting pot, right? The great mix of all sorts of people from all sorts of places, and just all these things that we can do together And I think it's arguable that I think we've maybe gotten a little bit away from that, right? I think
Sure.
it's still an underlying reality,
Very
right?
much
I
underlying
think
power.
most people would say, yeah, that the idea of the melting pot is kind of what we buy into, right?
Sure.
Um, and here in Leander, again, from a smaller community perspective, the race themselves, it's a nonpartisan race. Again, you're basically saying, I would like to volunteer to do this, serve in that capacity. Um, I've referred to it as a little bit of an aggrandized committee because that's kind of what it is,
Sure.
But the idea of the representative piece of that is really what that's about, right?
Sure.
So when you're talking about these ideas, and maybe sometimes they're a little bit of zany idea, but that's okay. It's good to have that conversation because there's people who would say, yeah, you know what? Why don't we have a Cheddar's restaurant? Like, why is that not one of the restaurants we have? There's only a certain amount of control that the city necessarily has there, right? But could we potentially, from an economic development perspective, reach out to that company, and say, hey, our residents have indicated that they would like one of your restaurants in our city, and would you like to come and tour and see what we have and see available opportunities? There's land here. There's a new building coming up over here. We have this new strip mall over here, et cetera. And I think we're definitely trending in that direction. I wouldn't say we're not doing that, right? But could we do more? You never know. And community outreach as part of the process is something that I think is super, super important. And you've said it a couple of times while we've been sitting here, is that you have to get involved, right? You have to take the time that it takes to at least express your opinion. And at the worst case scenario, that's the vote, right? That's going to the polls either early or I think it's May 4th, right?
It is.
So on May 4th, you show up and you punch the dial or whatever with the pencil. I forget what it is anymore, but you use that mechanism to express how you feel about where you want your city to be going, right? Where you want your city to change if that's what you want, or continue if that's what you want, whatever your voice might be. But when there's only Again, I think in the last election, I think it probably kind of started touching maybe close to 5%. I remember at one point I looked at this, but it was between 3 and 5% of the total registered population actually showed up to vote. And in Texas, historically and statistically, registered voters track around 70 to 80% of the population, right? So if we just use simple caveman math, right, and there's 100,000 people in Leander and 70,000 of them on the low end are registered voters, and only 5% of that actually shows up.
That was another thing that caught my eye in if they only had 5%, surely I could help get 10.
Yeah, you would. I mean, and I would hope I would wish that for any candidate, right? Like if you can get more people to come out, right, then we get a better representative sample of what the citizens in the city want, right? It's about whether it's a crazy idea or something that's really hard to understand or whatever the case might be. It is about the best idea, like what will be the best, what works best for our community, because you and I are sitting here today, right? And we're having this conversation, and you're making yourself available as a candidate for the mayor of the city. And you'll do that maybe if you were to win, you would do it for a term, maybe 2 terms, so that's 6 years, right? 6 years in the greater scheme of a city, in any city, right? Is
Only
nothing.
goes so far.
It's nothing, right? It's a minute period of time, but the city keeps going, right? Citizens come and go, they move in, they move out, they live their lives, and however you want to look at that. But the city doesn't go away. I mean, we hope, and hopefully there's an opportunity that the climate and all those other things don't force us to all move north. So that kind of thing. And again, I'm being kind of silly there, but at the end of the day, those decisions that were made, 10, 15, 20 years ago can still be influencing what's happening today. So the same holds true going forward, right?
Being homesteaded is part of the equation. My business allows me to be deeply rooted.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough business here.
Mm-hmm.
And my customers actually can come to me from other states, and they have. Once in the service industry, no matter what you do, if you do it correctly, your referral.
Yeah, no,
list
people
be
will
so,
find you.
yeah.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Again, I had some of my experience in the past was in the hospitality industry. So I really am, that was where I cut my teeth, right?
Yes.
So my service orientation is very, very much from a hospitality perspective, right? So I view the world from that lens. I
Yes.
didn't necessarily grow up that way, and I didn't necessarily intend for that to be the case. But
And now you
it
see the
doesn't,
value.
absolutely, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't get rid of it. I've tried. I can't get rid of it. I cannot go to a store. I cannot sit in a restaurant. I cannot go have a drink without orienting the experience to the level of service that I received, right? So then you take that, and how do you approach your business? You've homesteaded, you've created a solid business in the city where people recognize who you are, and they come to you for that service, right? But that's not by accident, right?
Correct.
That's with a purpose. Like, you did that with intent. There was never just like, I think I'll just fix some generators,
That's
right?
by looking at your comeback rate. And your
Yeah,
comeback
no,
rate
absolutely.
becomes zero. Yeah, that baby needs to be zero.
Trust me, when I was in the hospitality industry, when I was I was director of sales and marketing, right? And one of the things that I would constantly, and today, even to this day, it's still something that I harp on all the time. From a sales methodology perspective, you go through the prospecting process and you find out what it is that your customer wants, and then you kind of go through the solutioning process where you're giving them the services or the the widgets or whatever it is that you have, and you try. It's a sales process, so you want to convince them that this is the best decision, right? And it's done with an intent that you believe in your product. It should be, at least. And that you really believe that this is the best solution. They've come to you because they're looking to solve X, and you have Y, right? So you're showing them, like, Y will solve your X equation here. And so, but one of the things that I was always harping on, and still I think it's one of the most important parts of the process, is what about the lost business? When you didn't get the sale, why? Like, what was it that you missed? Like, was it not the right solution? Was it something that you said? How did that occur, right? And I think far too often in many of the things that we do from a community perspective, we don't look at that. We don't look at, like, well, why didn't that business select Leander? And sometimes it's a pretty easy equation, right? Like something like a Samsung, right? Well, there wasn't enough land. Like, there's nowhere for that to go, right?
Yeah.
And you'll hear people talk about, well, we don't have any kind of, enough incentives for businesses, right? And I'm like, well, honestly, they got enough money. They
Right.
don't really need our incentives, right? What
that's
they need is the location. They need the land. They need somewhere to go, right? And their equation and the way that they look at things should be, I would think, more along the lines of, where can we get the best deal, right? Doesn't
Well,
necessarily need to
next
enjoy.
next to location.
Yeah, right. I
location.
mean, again, and a lot of that is small business, right?
Yes.
Leander is just by the very nature of the city and where we are in Central Texas, related to Austin and arguably to San Antonio,
So
right?
one of my questions, this leads to a question. Why did we get a Whataburger right next to a Dairy Queen instead of a Cheddar's? That's just an honest probing question. And
Yeah.
again, it raised laughter with
Right.
you.
No,
and-
but
and
it's a legitimate
and
question.
it may lead to a frown somewhere else. But that's me. That's that. If the machine is not running perfectly smooth
Right,
from as many pressure points as we can measure,
right.
then I'm going to start asking. And that comes from a guy who builds race cars. We're looking for every horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
We love sprint cars, big
Mhm.
sprint cars. So when we put that thing on the dyno, it's one of our, we call it a junkyard project. We get the engine out of the junkyard, and so we're trying to save cost and get more people involved at a lower level. And here's our plan, here's our recipe. And so we're trying to hit 550 horsepower on the dyno
Mhm.
at the wheels. And so again, that's I bring the car over and I say it's ready to go, and then the guys are testing it and they're putting pressure on it, and they're going, "No, Fred, you didn't quite make it." So I get discouraged, but I still am going out to the 550 horsepower. So there's a lot of what's it called? Metaphors.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's what I was going to say.
Relatability.
It's a perfect metaphor.
I bring relatability
Mm-hmm.
to the table. I can relate to the residents and the business entrepreneurs. I think there's some monkey business going on with developers and development, and some more hostile takeover with land. If the fellow didn't have to sell, or if he didn't have a tax burden, maybe he would keep the land in his family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that hurts the guy who wants to bring cheddars, because boy, that's a great piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, everybody should be able to get to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Not what they're forced to do.
Right.
I don't. In our civil life, I don't think we should push people. We should be accommodating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aggravated. That's, you say, what brings me to the table. Aggravation on how people treat people.
Yeah.
Is part of it.
I mean, it's fair.
And maybe this will be a good place to end. I'm not sure what else.
Yeah, we're closing. We're closing in on that.
My parents. This is how we should. The public square should be a certain way. And my parents, when I was a boy, when us four boys were young, we'd go out to dinner, and all they had to do was look across the table and say, "Boys, we're in public. Knock it off." And that's the kind of courtesy we should give everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a, I mean, they're the parents, so
right.
they have a bigger hammer.
Right.
But in just men to men, people to people, we should say, something's going wrong at the park. And you walk over and you say, "Hey, you guys okay?" Gently, "Hey, you try to diffuse it." That's another one of my characters. I'm a good diffuser.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from being a hothead for a lot of years. I learned, but God intervened and showed me how, that you really didn't handle that right.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you a different way. So that's a beautiful explanation of how God takes our weaknesses and makes them strong. So I'm a person that can make the picture strong. I'm confident.
Tell the folks where they can find you. What are your socials? Where are you on the web?
I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you my email. I've taken everything else down because everybody was just being argumentative.
Okay.
So again, I'm back to total grassroots.
Fair.
I'm around enough that people know me and can see me. Maybe if not this go around, then the next. But
okay.
This is a process. But Fred at fixyourgenerator.com. That's Fred at yourgenerator.com. Fred at fixyourgenerator.com.
All right. Well, Fred, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time very, very much, and best of luck in your endeavors to run for mayor.
Thank you very much.
All right. So that's it for this episode, and I certainly hope that you guys are getting something out of this. I know that I am, and I appreciate every candidate who's taken the time, and those who have not yet shown up. We're working on that, so hopefully we're going to get everybody onto the podcast here over the next week to 10 days and have all that information out there prior to, I was hoping that I could get it all done before April 4th. But it looks like we're going to be a little bit behind that date, but that's okay. We'll have all this information out for you. You can find it at voteinleander.com or on leaninleander.net. Again, please subscribe if you like the content. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, and YouTube and Facebook, as well as a couple other social media channels. So however you find us, I appreciate you finding us. Hope you stick around for a little bit, and that's going to wrap us for this one. Thanks again, Fred. I appreciate it. We'll see you all next time.